And we are back. War Room Pandemic, episode number 10. Jason Miller here with Raheem Kassam. Stephen K. Bannon is on the line. Special guest today, we have Kimberly Leonard, who's a senior health policy reporter at the Washington Examiner, a regular panelist also on the What the Health podcast with Kaiser Health News. You can follow her on Twitter at LeonardKL. Steve, you want to give us your thoughts and catch us up to speed with new developments?
Yeah. The first thing I want to say is, besides the three, we finally have somebody here co-hosting with us that knows what they're talking about. So we want to thank Kimberly for coming in. She's one of the top experts in town.
Thanks for having me.
So, Kimberly, Friday we had the big press conference, which was huge. Obviously, a whole bunch of news happening over the weekend. We've seen the what's going on in the Chinese markets and Shanghai, more cases. Give us your sense, kind of take us back in how important was Friday's news conference and what are the big developments from over the weekend?
Right. Everything has happened so quickly. On Friday, we really saw the Trump administration take more dramatic steps to try to keep the coronavirus from coming to the United States. They're quarantining people who are U.S. citizens who are coming back, have to sort of be off on their own for at least 14 days to make sure they're not going to infect anyone else. They also said that people who had been traveling to China who are not U.S. citizens, anytime in the last 14 days, can't come in right now. So these are temporary steps. They're much more dramatic than they were earlier on in the week. And even though they've made these kinds of announcements, they still continue to say that the risk to the U.S. population at this time is low.
So you're covering this every single day, and you're following the administration, you're following the Hill, you're someone who's a healthcare policy expert, the ins and outs. Where do you think the administration is right now as far as the preparedness level and truly understanding what's going on to the extent that we can? This is obviously a global pandemic. Right. And to what extent does Capitol Hill have any idea what's going on?
That's where it's so hard with every virus, every new virus like this. When it comes to preparedness, we're always behind. Prevention is not something that we put a lot of funding into generally. Mostly we are, reactionary, and that's true for a lot of other countries. Having said that, obviously, we have the State of the Union coming up. We're all listening to see whether President Trump is going to be asking for additional funding to help combat the coronavirus. We know that the NIH is already working on a vaccine, but that's going to take some time. If you recall, at the beginning of the Ebola outbreak years ago, they had started on a vaccine then, and only in the last few months is one now available. So these things take a lot of time. There's still so much that we don't know about the virus, and Congress is holding a hearing on Wednesday to review, some of their options, and we could see, funding, additional actions, additional power given to different parts of the administration. And until that happens, there are still so many questions about this virus.
But are we?
Go ahead, Kimberly, let me jump in. Delta just announced that they're canceling all flights out of China and to China till April 30th. Can you let's just go back in time, because you're an expert. Walk people through exactly what this virus is, how big it is in China, how did we kind of get here, and now we named the show Pandemic when we launched it a couple of weeks ago. Yeah. Now people are actually saying this is going to be a pandemic. Can you walk people through how serious this is, how big it is, what scale it is?
Yeah, I mean, you definitely have top global health officials who are saying this could become a pandemic, which means that it reaches, all over the globe, essentially. Right now, most of the cases are still in China. We have over 17,000. We have more than 360 deaths. And this is, what I'm saying on Monday. It's something that is rapidly evolving, more and more cases. It is a respiratory illness. Now, for some people, they have no symptoms at all. And you kind of think, oh, okay, that's good. But guess what? They have no symptoms. They still carry the virus, and they can still pass it on to other people who then can have more serious symptoms. So once the U.S. government kind of learned that all these people could be carriers and not have symptoms, they thought, well, that makes screening procedures at airports very difficult. And so that's why they took much more aggressive actions. So once you kind of saw the cases going up a little bit, you saw more airlines canceling flights, in part because of in part because of low demand, and in part because they didn't want to endanger their staff. And after that, you started seeing countries say, okay, we're going to monitor what's going on a little bit more. And then the U.S. dramatically scaled up its efforts on Friday, largely because of this asymptomatic cases. And then also, because they were just concerned at, being able to stop this thing before it really starts to spread here. Other countries took similar measures as the U.S. We have Japan, Australia, Russia. They're all kind of really being careful about who's coming in and trying to watch what's what. But it's going to be really difficult. I mean, people can fly from China to another country and then fly here. And it might be hard to be able to contain this virus ultimately, especially since it's asymptomatic for a lot of people.
So we're up to 11 cases here in the U.S. We were talking before the show about the quarantine aspect of this. It's the first time in decades where we've had actual U.S. citizens being quarantined by the federal government. This is a pretty big deal. I don't think people quite realize how big the significance of this is. I also think it was notable how little pushback.
When you say it's a huge deal, what do you mean by that? Because you study this all the time. Why is this a huge deal?
This isn't something the federal government really does. I mean, they have the authority to do it, but they haven't done it in 5 decades or so. And the CDC has the authority. There are local public health agencies that have done this when you've seen things like measles. But really, it's unprecedented. It just shows the fear that they have of it getting here. I mentioned for a lot of people it's asymptomatic. For other people, it's sort of like a cold, and then for others, it really creates symptoms more similar to pneumonia, which can make it really severe. And then obviously you have more than 360 cases in which people have died. At the same time, the U.S. is in the middle of this flu season. So clearing different people takes time. And the tests they have to check for coronavirus isn't 100%.
Well, so Dr. Fauci said that in the press conference on Friday, and I forget who asked him the question. He's like, well, not sure if it works. Sometimes, and that was the moment for me. I was like, what's going on? What do you mean the test doesn't work? What is it that, how certain even are they with these?
No, it's not anywhere near what it needs to be, and they realized that pretty soon into the process, and that was another reason why they decided to have more strict quarantining and essentially banning travel from certain parts of the world. I should say the World Health Organization is against really strong restrictions on travel and trade when there are outbreaks, because the problem is once you put it out there that you're going to restrict people from coming into your country, you risk having other countries not report cases of coronavirus. And then you end up making the problem worse. So that's what they're concerned about. They're also concerned that people are going to start to panic. We have a story on the Washington Examiner that talks about how the face masks have sold out all over D.C., but they don't really help prevent against coronavirus. And again, there aren't, right now, last I checked, there was one person who's being screened for coronavirus here in D.C., for example.
Steve, did we know about that?
No, we took comfort and we had a Perel on the counter in back of us.
Okay, yeah. So Steve's at a secure, undisclosed location. Maybe he knows something that we don't. But I want to.
Can I just pick up on something there? Why do you say this doesn't work?
And for anyone who's listening, only Raheem is holding up one of the masks, an unopened mask.
An unopened one.
Yes.
So the problem is that it still can seep along the sides and everything, and these things, when you sneeze, it goes through the air, and so the air droplets, go around that way. And you kind of think about, I don't know about you all, but I feel like every time I get on a plane, I catch something. And so you think about people flying from overseas, sneezing, catching something. You're in this, aluminum tube essentially for hours and hours. And so, there is a lot of concern that it can transmit. We have talked to those who are in charge of health agencies here in the U.S., and they have said that the masks are ineffective. This is hard, and every time you get a new virus, you kind of think, what's this going to look like? How deadly is it really? Right now, they think it's about 2% of those who catch it will die. But if there are all these other cases of people who are asymptomatic.
Kimberly, can we slow down? Help us with the math, because people are throwing out these terms called the RO number, which means how. Can you walk people through what the base of this is in China? What's the replication rate right now, as best as scientists as you know, and then what's the mortality rate?
Yeah, there's so much that they don't know, but so when you talk about how many people can it transmit to, if you have one person and we're all sitting in a room here, does it mean that if I have it, then all of you get it, or does it mean one person gets it? Does it mean no one really gets it? So that has to do with the transmittability of the virus. And then if you say you have, a 2% mortality, you kind of, as in, 2% of those who catch it die, you think, okay, well, that's kind of low. But if you have millions and millions of people who get it, then the numbers start to be really high. So for example, SARS had a 10% mortality rate, but we already have more deaths from coronavirus than we did from SARS, just because the number of people who are infected is so much higher.
So how many people do you think, right now we have the 17,000 cases, 360 deaths, 11 folks here in the U.S.
17,000 reported.
Well, that's where I was getting to. I want to know from Kimberly, what do you think that number really is? Because when you're talking about sealing off an entire province, when you're talking about sealing off cities that are 11 or 8 million people, just such massive scale that people here in the U.S. don't understand, what do you think the real number is?
Yeah, I've seen studies that have said it could be 10 times as high. But, it's impossible to know at this point. We're talking about massive cities, a virus that appears to, the numbers keep going up every single day, and they keep going up in the U.S. every single day. We know that 2 people who came back infected with coronavirus also infected their spouses. So it can be transmitted here. Who knows where else they went? Did they go to the grocery store? Were they sneezing there? Did people catch it there, pass it on? It's scary just because it's still a mysterious virus in so many ways.
So I want to take you there to the in the Huanggang. They were saying that they're essentially only letting people out every other day, and one person can leave the house or apartment, because again, it's not they necessarily have these single unit residences that are all separated. People are piled on top of each other. It's part of the reason why this blew up and expanded the way that it did, because the population density. But in the U.S., what do these quarantines actually look like? In China, they just go and literally put tape around the building and say you guys can't leave anymore. U.S. a little bit different. Are they moving people to a centralized location? Or they, do they block off, like here's a Howard Johnson, near the airport? Do they have tents set up? What does a quarantine in the U.S. look like?
Well, the one that's underway now for the 195 who were rushed back to the U.S., that's a military base out in California. Initially, they were kind of told, just hang out for 72 hours. We'll see how it goes. But then they said, no, we're going to keep you here for 14 days. So that really changed their plans. Initially, they had sort of said during the press conference that people would be self-quarantining in their homes. But my understanding is now that no, they're going to be opening similar military bases for those who fly back from China and keeping them under quarantine and checking in with them.
Kimberly, doesn't that concern you? Because even in Ebola, we had people, self-quarantine, and every time you see people coming back that we're in control of, like the folks in the consulate in Wuhan, they come to these military bases. They have guys meet them in hazmat suits, and then they go to individual quarantines for at least 14 days. Is that signaling to us that this is more serious, or people are taking this more serious than they have some of these epidemics in the past?
Yeah, that's definitely one of the reactions that I've seen a lot of as the U.S. has continued to scale up its effort against coronavirus, because they continue to say that the risk to Americans is low, but then these dramatic actions make it seem as though, well, no, maybe it's not so low. They have said we expect to see more cases here. The Centers for Disease Control has had calls every single day with reporters. And it does seem as though we're going to be getting a lot more cases. And again, even as much as they try to contain this, there still are going to be people who are flying to a lot of different places and getting through.
So who right now in the government, whether it be in the administration, on the Hill, at the White House specifically, who do you kind of view as being the North Star on who really knows what's going on, and you pay attention to their words more than anybody else's?
Well, Alex Azar is in charge of the White House's task force on this. And he's also head of the Department of Health and Human Services, and he's got a lot of other things going on. The Trump administration is doing a lot on healthcare. But he has a lot of experience. He worked under the George W. Bush administration, so he was there for SARS. He's done this before, but we didn't have the same reaction back then in the U.S. He is the person in charge. There have been calls I don't know if you recall, but during the Obama administration, there was an Ebola czar that was appointed, Ron Klain. And so there have been calls to perhaps have some outside person who's coordinating all the different agencies, as opposed to having, someone who's also in charge of health and human services, just to make sure that everyone's on the same page, that they all understand what's going on. I can't tell yet whether that's necessary here, but there are those who lived through the Obama administration who say, yes, you need that kind of coordination leader who will keep things effective and running smoothly.
Look, O'Brien, the National Security Advisor, was on, I think, with Margaret Brennan yesterday on CBS, and he said that the administration has offered on a number of occasions the Chinese, he's offered assistance, but it's been turned down. So we don't even have a CDC team over there. When you go back and you mention these numbers, and this is what's reported, or this is what we kind of feel, we're hearing this, do you think the Chinese have a handle on exactly how big this is and what the real numbers are? You think they're suppressing that? You think they know it or they don't know it? One of the reasons they won't let the CDC in is they are not on top of this as they should be.
Well, there were reports over the weekend that say that in the early days of this, that they should have been more cautious, that they really should have been sounding the alarm then. I will say now, every time I tune into a World Health Organization press conference, one thing they cannot emphasize enough is how hard they believe the Chinese are working to report the cases, to keep this under control.
But the World Health Organization, but the World Health Organization gets a lot of money. They've done a terrible. That it sounded like they were kowtowing when the CCP took a month and a half to announce this or even admit it. The World Health Organization first did not call it an emergency. A week later, went to Beijing and essentially kowtowed. That memo they put out was embarrassing. They keep talking about how transparent, how on top of things. You haven't seen, but no one's seen any actions like that. So how do you put credence in a WHO daily press conference when they continue to kowtow to the CCP?
Well, I mean, just because we do see numbers coming every single day, we have heard from officials all the time. I just don't know how they can have an accurate number for us without almost testing every single person in the area, just because, as I mentioned, there are so many cases that are asymptomatic. So it's not, it's hard to count those numbers if people aren't showing up at a hospital, with these serious symptoms and getting tested and all of that. So we don't have any evidence, I would say, at this point to say that they're being secretive about this. We know President Trump has continued to say that he, thinks that they're doing a good job, but I have seen more reports over the weekend that kind of said in the early days that was not great.
So what's the buried lead here as far as you're looking for where this story is going to go once the impeachment stuff all passes this week, or at least we think it will. It could go on to perpetuity. We'll find out. This is going to be the top story in the country. It's already the top story in the world, but this will be the top story in the country. What do you think is really going to drive news coverage over this next week to 10 days? Do you think this is something that'll come up in the State of the Union? And what are we missing?
Yeah, I think it probably will come up in the State of the Union just because it's so hard to ignore. But I don't know yet what the president is going to call for, whether it's additional funding or authorities, whether it's changes, maybe more trade restrictions. I'm not sure yet at this point, but I do expect members of Congress to sort of continue going out there and saying, there's something more that we have to do. We've seen it on the campaign trail, too. Joe Biden wrote an op-ed in USA Today where he essentially said the Trump administration was not prepared to take this on. We'll see about that.
Well, let's stick right there for one.
Yeah.
So Joe Biden came out and said it was xenophobic and it was an overreaction. Mm-hmm. So he has a little bit kind of saying two things at the same time. One, they weren't prepared for it, but then two, this was an overreaction. Yeah. What were your reactions to what Joe Biden said?
Well, I'm old enough to remember when Republicans criticized the Obama administration over Ebola. So, you can always throw things around and saying, oh, you're unprepared, this isn't how it should be going, et cetera, et cetera. When there's a new mysterious illness that arrives in the United States, you have tools that you can pull from that you've used in the past, but you can't always contain these things, So it's hard to know, if we had this one person appointed or if we had more funding, et cetera, things would have turned out differently. Maybe they might have been worse. So it's hard to tell. So this is something that is political, as well as medical. It's something that
we had Dr. Stephen Hatfill on the other day, and he's an expert at George Washington University in all things contagious and infectious diseases, things like that. He said where this is really where the rubber meets the road in the U.S. is the local preparedness level. What happens if this pops up in a community or a city that we're not expecting it to? What's essentially the grassroots response? Do you think, following Friday's press conference, that local medical providers and emergency preparedness folks are ready for this?
Well, there have been calls to increase the amount of funding that hospitals are getting to help prepare for this. We always hear from officials that they think they're prepared, that they're doing the best they can, et cetera. During Ebola, it was shocking to people that nurses who were caring for a patient with Ebola got it. That should not have happened the way that a lot of people saw it in terms of what they understood about Ebola, in terms of how they were, trying to control for it and so forth. Having said that, every time you go through something like Ebola, you do come out of it with different lessons. And so there has been, better coordination, better reporting. You try to communicate with, there has been education to hospitals about how to prepare for this.
So you think most hospitals around the country, if you went into First Health of Arlington, Virginia, just, random hospital, if you went walking in there and said, hey, I think I have the coronavirus, that they would know what to do or how to direct you? Or do you think that it's maybe some do, some don't?
Well, they should know what to do. I mean, but putting aside the fact that, hospitals still have serious infection rates of all different kinds of diseases. A lot of people who go into a hospital with something else end up getting an infection. So they need to work on that separately. But CDC has been doing training with hospitals on how to prepare for this. Now, are they actually ready when it happens? If not, we'll find out really soon.
All right. Well, thank you very much. Kimberly Leonard, who's a senior health policy reporter at the Washington Examiner, regular panelist on the What the Health podcast for Kaiser Health News. You can follow her on Twitter @LeonardKL. Thank you. You're very smart. You know this stuff inside and out. I encourage everyone to follow Kimberly's Twitter feed, follow her stories at the Washington Examiner. I have a feeling we're going to be talking a whole lot more. So this is War Room Pandemic, episode 10. We'll be right back.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to War Room Pandemic. It is Monday, February 3rd, the year of our Lord 2020, broadcasting live out of Capitol Hill. Jason Miller, Raheem Kassam, we've had Stephen K. Bannon, Kimberly Leonard, and now joining us on the line, Steve Moore. Jason Miller just joining us back in studio, as well as the news flashes across the screens. The coronavirus death toll overtaking the SARS, the severe acute respiratory syndrome epidemic in the country from years ago. People will recall. Jason.
Yeah, and Stephen, do we have you on the line?
Good morning.
Hey, good morning, my man. I want to dive into the immediate economic implications here. We saw the Shanghai Composite down 7.7%. China had to dump in $174 billion in liquidity to keep the market afloat. Hong Kong is closing its borders. What's the immediate economic impact here now that the Chinese markets are open again after the Lunar New Year?
Well, look, I mean, everybody's spooked by this virus, obviously, because we want to see it contained as quickly as possible. I'm not a health expert, but it looks like that there's been real progress just the last couple of days in terms of finding some kind of vaccine to stop the spread. So it does sound like, at least for now, the worst fears have been alleviated. It's obviously a much bigger problem in China than it is in the United States. All the deaths, I think, with the exception of one or two, have happened there. So I think there's been an overreaction in the U.S. stock market, and I think now is not a bad time to be buying stocks, because as soon as this news of a containment of the virus hits the market's going to go right back up again, because the U.S. economy is really strong. I mean, did you see the manufacturing numbers? They were fantastic. That was the one area of weakness of the economy. This economy, you can't hold it back.
Yeah, and so, but Steve, so let's stick there for a moment because obviously we're talking about the global supply chain. U.S. market was down 600 on Friday. It's up 350 so far, so it's on a pretty good rebound.
Yeah, by the way, say that again. Hold on, say that again. The market is up 350 points. Right?
350 points. Pretty significant considering.
So yeah, I mean, this makes the point. I saw earlier it was up, and this. So I think that the fear has subsided a bit, and look, the economy. We got the lowest unemployment rate in 50 years, the lowest inflation rate in 50 years, the lowest interest rates in 50 years, the highest wage gains in 20 years. The one area I was a little worried about in terms of growth for 2020 was manufacturing. And then latest number that came out today looks like manufacturing spring back to life. So I'm not buying this downer stuff. It's like when the Democrats said 3 months ago, recessions are right around the corner, and then we had like 2 blockbuster jobs reports. I mean, Trump is doing things that are pro-growth, and he's cutting taxes, cutting regulation, promoting American energy, 2 trade deals that are both blockbusters in terms of, improving American access to foreign markets. What's not to like about that picture?
Well, but let me ask you this question, Steve. How, though, is the global supply chain and our reliance on China for manufacturing? We were seeing potentially impacts into Apple production, Tesla production.
Yeah.
How do you think this is going to play out as far as U.S. and, like I said, the supply chain? And, is this an immediate impact? Is this months down the road? Is it too early to say? Or do you think it's all overblown?
It's a good question, and I'm not an expert enough to know the answer to that question. I mean, look, we don't right now. China doesn't actually buy that much from us. We buy a lot from them, and they don't buy much, from us. So, the downturn in the Chinese economy, which is happening now. I mean, they make it negative, by the way. They haven't had a recession in 30 years, and now as a result of not just the virus, but them getting hurt by the tariffs, the fact that some of the factories have been leaving China, the fact that they have a centrally planned economy and they're misallocating capital. That's, very bad news for China. And by the way, I don't want their economy to implode. I mean, we do better when China is growing, no question about it. But I don't think we're overly reliant on China right now. So the supply chain issue, I think, is a minor concern, but only a minor one.
Steve, there's some Goldman Sachs is now saying they think the U.S. GDP will be lowered.
First, stop. Hold on. Stop. Who in the hell listens to Goldman Sachs? I mean, really, they've been so really. I mean, really, these people. I mean, I don't want to insult my good friend Steve Bannon, I think, who was at Goldman for many years, but they've caused a lot of the big problems in the world. I mean. So, okay, now what are these idiots at Goldman Sachs saying now? These are the same people that said Donald Trump, if he's elected president, is going to cause a second Great Depression. We got the best economy in 30 years. But anyway, go ahead.
Nice.
I love it.
There.
No, that's Steve. That's why we have you on, because we want to get to the bottom of it. We read these headlines and we want to get from an expert economist like yourself.
Look, I'm sorry to go off on this, but here's my problem in economics. It doesn't matter how many times people are wrong. People still listen to them. People still listen to the IMF. The IMF hasn't been right about anything in 50 years. People listen to, you have people actually listen to Paul Krugman. Well, everything Paul Krugman said for the last 5 years has been wrong. I mean, it's just so frustrating to me that it's like a doctor who amputates the wrong arm and then you go back to him, to take out your appendix.
So, Steve, tomorrow night, State of the Union.
Oh, we're just dumping Goldman Sachs now after that? We're just dumping that out. What are they? I want to know what they're saying.
You actually never told me what Goldman Sachs.
Oh, they said I said it, but you're super fired up in a way only Steve Moore can. No, they're saying the U.S. GDP will be lowered half a point this quarter.
Why? Well, because of the
coronavirus, and they think the impact of.
Well, look, that may. We don't know. I mean, certainly the economies take a little bit of a hit, but if the news today that that there's some kind of vaccine that could stop this, then I think it just drums back to life. But look, who knows? I mean, I still think with the big news of the last month or two has been the trade deal with China, because it takes off the table a big trade war and a tariff escalation. So I think that outweighs the negative effect of the coronavirus.
So,
Well, so let me just ask a follow-up question to that then. And disregarding the Goldman Sachs element of it, is the economy as you see it in its current situation, is it robust enough to withstand a shock from coronavirus?
Yeah, look, I mean, this may be one of those few times that Goldman Sachs is right, that the economy takes a bit of a hit. People are worried about going outside or going to shopping malls or going to movie theaters. And, if there are some, as you guys were just talking about, there is some negative impact on the blockchain. The fact is this is a global economy. So yeah, look, I mean, I'm just saying people shouldn't be jumping out windows over this and thinking like this is the smallpox vaccine. I mean, smallpox disease, it isn't.
Okay. Steve, wanted to take you to a tweet yesterday from our good friend Maria Bartiromo. She put this out yesterday morning. Didn't dive into it as much on the show. Did have Steve on to talk about the coronavirus, but Maria tweeted this. So let me get this straight. China knew about corona outbreak in December of 2019, but still sent a delegation to White House for phase 1 signing, then largest delegation to Davos. And she links to a New York Times story. Do you think because of the coronavirus outbreak that is going to have a massive impact on the implementation of phase 1? And what does this mean for phase 2 or future U.S. trade talks?
Well, first of all, I agree entirely with the indignation that Maria. By the way, Maria, boo, boo, boo. My heart goes boom. I love Maria. She's so smart, so beautiful. She's wonderful. She's my favorite person on the planet. So, but she's right about this. I mean, how dare they? Jeopardize world health. All they've done since the corona, showed up on the scene was cover it up. That's what communist countries do, right? I mean, this is a communist. I'm very much into calling them communist China again because they're communists. Mm-hmm. This is a repressive regime that's over there in China. They don't believe in human rights. They don't believe in the health of people. They don't believe in the rights of individuals. They believe in power, just like Democrats in Washington believe in power. And so, they should be really reprimanded for putting other people at risk and just not alerting the world to the fact that this might be a virus that could spread. Instead, they covered it up.
All right. We have been joined by Stephen Moore, the author of Trumponomics. You can get that on Amazon.com. He's also an economist at the Heritage Foundation. Stephen, thanks for joining us today.
Okay, guys. Have a great week.
Bye now. Thank you.
And the book ships straight from China.
Yes, exactly.
Kidding. I don't know where it ships from, but you should get it. It's great. I was there when Steve launched it in New York. Fantastic book. I also wanted to bring to people's attention that was something that Stephen said just now, which maybe not get enough attention, is the manufacturing report that came out. The U.S. manufacturers grew businesses in January for the first time in 6 months. The study shows if it's over 50%, they're growing. If it's under 50%, they're not growing. It's 50.9% the index is at the moment, and that's overtaking the predictions. There was a study done before, or a survey done before of economists. They said there would be a 48.5% number on that index, and that would mean that the manufacturing firms are not growing. It actually is the opposite. There has been a growth in January, and the question is, it's a 50.9% now. So it's not it's a big jump in the sense of the relative numbers, but is it a big enough jump? The question is being asked: is there any wiggle room on this coronavirus stuff? But the manufacturing stuff looks good.
Absolutely. And we are joined now by Curtis Ellis from America's First Priorities, America's First Principles, a former White House staffer. Curtis, you with us?
Yes, I am.
Excellent. Well, thanks for joining us. Curtis, you're someone who's been on top of the trade debate with China. You've written a number of things. You're obviously part of the Trump campaign where we had the chance to work together. Level set for us from someone who's a supporter of the president. What does this mean for, I want to follow up on the question I threw to Steve Moore at the end there. What does this mean for the implementation of phase 1, but also what does this mean for potential phase 2 and other U.S.-China trade talks going forward?
Well, immediately and specifically on the implementation of phase 1, it called for China to purchase more goods and services, and it stipulated energy. Now, the price of oil is falling, and the price of natural gas sometimes moves in tandem with that. As these goods become less expensive, it means China will have to buy more because the limits that were set in phase one were dollar amounts, were specific numerical numbers pegged to dollars, not cubic feet or barrels of oil, but certain they have to meet certain targets of dollars. So basically, if it becomes cheaper, they're going to have to buy more of it to meet the targets. As for going forward, phase two, and generally trade with China, what this coronavirus shows is it shows the flaws in the basic premises of the current spate of globalization, which is you can trust your capital to invest it in a faraway country and nothing bad will ever happen. This goes right to the heart of what David Ricardo wrote about on the principles of political economy and taxation back in 1817, which has been the text for globalism. And let's go right to page 146 of what David Ricardo wrote. He said that the insecurity of capital, when not under the immediate control of its owner, along with the natural disinclination that every man has to quit the country of his birth and entrust himself to a strange government and new laws, checks the emigration of capital. So he premised his whole argument on the fact that people will naturally not want to invest their capital in a faraway country where it's out of their control and put in the trust of a strange government. Well, I'll tell you what, China's communist government is the poster child of a strange government. And now with the coronavirus, you see why you don't want to quit your country and put your capital at risk in a country which, as Stephen Moore was saying, covers things up, besides the fact it doesn't even believe in private property in the first place. So we're going to see more investment in this country because guess what? If you have pegged your entire business model on being able to sell things in the United States because you're going to be able to make them more cheaply in China, that's not going to work if you can't get your stuff to the store shelves in America. You'd rather make a little less profit by making it in America, but be guaranteed that you're actually going to be able to get your product out of the factory to the consumer, right? Rather than thinking, well, I'll use labor arbitrage and find cheaper labor overseas, and I'll be able to make more money by having just-in-time warehousing, just-in-time delivery, and transoceanic shipping, and all this global supply chain logistics management. Dispense with all that. Make the stuff closer to home where you know you will be able to get it to the market. Because right now you're seeing Nike taking a big hit. You're seeing others taking a hit because they can't get their goods to the stores. Number one, the stores in China are closed. And number two, the stores in America are dependent on this sole source supplier in China where the factories are shut. So this really goes right to the heart of the premises, right to the heart of the entire regime of globalization, corporate globalization, and intercontinental supply chains that we've been living under for the last 20, 30 years.
So, Curtis, I wanted so let's stay in Asia with this for a moment here. And we're talking, obviously, just a moment ago, you're talking about kind of the U.S., China, and the broader globalization. But specifically within Asia, what does the coronavirus do as far as elevating the importance of Singapore? And how does this also change the importance of the Hong Kong market as well? Obviously, the Chinese want to move everything to the Shanghai market. Seeing a whole bunch of things that are shifting there. What's kind of the state of play as far as the financial markets then in Asia?
Well, we've seen the Asian financial markets take a huge hit today because this is the first day the markets in China have been open after the Lunar New Year holiday. It's going to be, again, all of these countries, Singapore and the Asian countries, South Korea, are very integrated, much more integrated with China than we are, their economies and their supply chains and everything else. And so they're taking a big hit, and we're starting to see the balkanization of China and its satellites. The people are upset in South Korea that South Korea has not closed its border to the free flow of people from China, whereas Hong Kong the doctors are ready to go on strike, and others as well, because they want to see that border closed. So we can see this spread to the other countries. Now, there's historic antipathies between Vietnam and China. There's suspicion from China's other neighbors. So, and the Japanese. Well, that's legendary. The enmity between those two countries. So we're going to see this. This exacerbates it. The virus exacerbates all of these latent tensions that have been pushed in the background by a booming economy. It kind of goes to the typical, the old story that when everybody's making money, they forget about the ancient enmities. But when times get tough, everything flares up.
So, Curtis, in the last block, had Stephen Moore, our friend from over at Heritage, give his reactions to Goldman saying that he thinks, or that they think, U.S. GDP will be lowered 0.5 point this quarter because of the coronavirus. In the whole way too soon predictions game, what do you think this means for the U.S. economy in Q1, but stretch it out as we talk then into Q2, Q3, and into the election this November?
I think this is going to actually accelerate investment in America. As Stephen was saying, you see the manufacturing index is actually expanding. It's moved up. And this will accelerate that, I believe, for the reasons I said right at the beginning. The C-suite executives are now seeing the premises they used to justify investing in communist China were wrong, that you can't trust your capital to a strange government in a faraway place. And there are other technological trends going on now, too, that will push for localism, not globalism. You want production to be as close to the consumer as possible, not as far away as possible. And that bodes well for increased investment in the U.S.
And so, Curtis, tomorrow night, State of the Union. I know you have a pretty good insight into President Trump and policy things. We know he's going to have a very much of a positive, forward-looking type State of the Union. What do you expect to see?
I expect to see an emphasis on the economy, on this incredible economy, the blue-collar boom, how his policies of trade reform, tax reform, regulatory reform, and energy independence, energy dominance have just exploded this economy. And it's helped the lowest paid among us. And you're also going to see, of course, in there talk of criminal justice reform, the urban agenda, the opportunity zones, that as we build the economy, we're building it for everyone. It's going, and if I can lapse into the jargon and the rhetoric, America first means all of us.
And Curtis, what's the one thing that's coming up that's not on folks' radar screens when it comes to economic development, global trade that you've been discussing? What's something that should be on our radar screens we're not paying attention to?
I think it's going to be the effect of the Silicon Valley monopolists. There's going to be a greater push for, if not, I hate to say the word, well, I don't really hate to say the words, for lack of a more pretty euphemism, breaking up or taming these monopolies. We are seeing small businesses and local communities being decimated by having their businesses, their tax base, and their jobs destroyed by the concentration of wealth, economic activity, and ownership in a few people that own a few big servers.
So do you think that's an antitrust type thing, or is that some kind of congressional action? Or we're seeing both political forces on the left and the right calling for some of this. Obviously, everyone's beating up on big tech nowadays. How do you think this happens?
Yeah, I think it's going to be a combination of congressional action and antitrust action. Look, the FTC has been pretty slow on this stuff. But as the heat builds on Capitol Hill, thanks to folks like Senator Josh Hawley and others, and as you say, left and right, Democrats and Republicans agree on this, you're going to see the FTC wake up and start doing more. The Justice Department, the Antitrust Division, is calling together the state's attorney general, so we're going to see congressional action, executive action, state action, and federal action. That's a perfect storm.
Wow, some big news from Curtis Ellis. So, Curtis, thank you very much for joining us. This is episode 10, War Room Pandemic. We had Kimberly Leonard from Washington Examiner on earlier, Stephen Moore from Heritage. I'm Jason Miller, joined by Raheem Kassam. We will be back tomorrow.